We're continuing the amazing question that Andrew began to ask last time. So we're talking about sin. We talked about what sin was, and we spent some time on that, but we spent most of our time 2 weeks ago on the big question of why did God allow Adam and Eve to sin? I mean, how did that work? How did that happen? Why did it happen that way? And that basically means we're talking about the doctrine of providence, which is a very highfalutin sounding word, but the doctrine of providence just means basically that God is arranging and ordering things to turn out like he decided they would. When you think about how God works in this world, if you read the scripture, you shouldn't think of God as a guy who sort of builds a house and walks away from it, and the house just sort of endures because it was built so well. You should think of this world and God as though God is a pilot who is steering this ship that is the world through rapids, through the shallows, out into the open sea, and anywhere he wants it to go. God is in charge and steering this world and the people in it, like you and I, the way he wants. So it doesn't matter. Andrew laid out he laid out a few different scenarios, different ways people have thought through church history about how that happens. But no matter which one you choose, and only one of them is correct, no matter which one you choose, everyone agrees that God is in charge. The question is, how is God in charge? Like, what are the mechanics once you go beyond just the generic God's in charge? What does that actually mean? You know, what's it actually look like? And so what we're going to do today, what Andrew's going to do today, is he's going to talk about that by looking at at least two passages of scripture that explain that, so you can see it. But before we dive into that, I'm going to show you a picture and briefly explain the two options that Andrew laid out last time, and explain which one is correct. And then Andrew will look at those two passages of scripture so we can sort of see it unfold with our eyes, so to speak. So, okay, here's option number one. And I'll call there's two popular options that are just, floating around out there in the Christian world. Here's option number one, which I'll call divine chess, where people look at how God works in the world and how we work in the world. And they sort of have this image of, we do what we want to do. We make our decisions, good or bad. We make the decisions. And God is sort of the ultimate ninja who sees what we do, and then he immediately counteracts it with some sort of move. And so he sort of funnels our decisions the way he wants them. So you think of it as a chess match. We advance the pawn 2 spaces. He brings his knight out to counter it. And because God is the grand master of chess, God always wins. So here, this is a really popular version that's out there that a lot of people might throw out. We do what we want. God does what he wants, and he always manages to check us, and then he wins in the end. The problem is that this kind of model doesn't really have God in charge of anything. It has God just reacting to what we decide to do. And when you look at scripture, you don't get the idea that God is up there saying, what is Tyler going to do? Is Tyler going to move his knight, or is he going to move his castle, or is he going to move the pawn 2 spaces here? Or what exactly is he going to do? Is he going to take the bishop in advance? God's not up there wondering what we're going to do and trying to figure out 20 moves in the future. The scripture tells us God decides what's going to happen. He upholds creation by the word of his power. He's not reacting to us. He is running the show. He's piloting the ship. So that leads us to the other option, which is where we sort of left last time, and spent a lot of our discussion on, is that God is actually in charge. And we're not exactly sure how that works, but we know that it does work. So the most we can say to sort of put the answer out on the table, and then I'll be quiet and Andrew will take us through 2 passages of scripture, is that basically this is what scripture teaches us. God is in charge. God governs, and he runs the world. He determines what happens in the world, and he makes things fall out so that everything he decided comes to pass. So God is in charge. He's not reacting. He is in charge of the world. But people like you and I do what we want. We do what we want when we want. And somehow God channels our decisions, uses our decisions, uses the decisions of other people and circumstances. He channels all of that and makes all of our free, intelligent, deliberate decisions turn out exactly the way he's determined they will. Often at a level so far removed from us through secondary causes or third causes, 2 or 3 or 4 times removed, that we're not even aware that that's what's going on. That's what you see all throughout Scripture. That's what you see with Nebuchadnezzar being used to destroy Judah. He didn't know that he was being used to destroy Judah, but God told Jeremiah, Nebuchadnezzar, my servant, I'm bringing him here. He's going to destroy all of you guys because of your sin. Now, Nebuchadnezzar had no idea. He just wanted to conquer, and he did, but operating on his conscience and on his mind at a level way beyond what he can even know. God is directing him that way. But yet Nebuchadnezzar is still responsible, because in Jeremiah 25, God says, I'm going to use Nebuchadnezzar. He's going to destroy you. And then God turns around in the same chapter and says, and then after Nebuchadnezzar does that, then I'm going to destroy him because he's so evil that he destroyed my people. And you read that and you're like, but I don't understand. And God says to us, I know you don't understand because you're just little children compared to me, and you're never going to understand. And then that right there, that's about as far as God will let us go. God's in charge. Everything happens because he wants it to. So there's no accidents. We're not left hopeless. And we still make our own decisions, but God, above our level of conscious understanding, God is directing everything to turn out the way he decided. And if that wasn't true, if God wasn't in charge of this world, then prophecy wouldn't even exist. God wouldn't be able to tell us what would happen in the future because he wouldn't know. God doesn't just look down the corridors of time and foresee, like some psychic, foresee that this is going to happen. He determines that things are going to happen, but yet we and Satan are still personally responsible. And that is the answer. There's 2 one-line passages of scripture I'll read, and then we can talk, but the rest of the time will basically be Andrew's. There's a bunch of passages that we could go to about it. So I want to leave you with this to think about this, and then you'll see it unfold as Andrew goes through the 2 passages. The first one is Proverbs 16:33. Proverbs 16:33. And this is what it says. It's very simple. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. So this is Proverbs. So it's like a bumper sticker theology. But what it says is pretty simple. People can gamble. They can do whatever they want. They can make their own decisions. But whatever they do decide, they decide because God decided they would decide it. And again, you're left with, well, I don't really get that. And then God says, I know, but that's okay. Deuteronomy 29:29 is important. Just remember that. The last one, and then I am finished, is Revelation 17 and verse 17. This is part of this the famous vision of the woman of Babylon and the beast. And this is what God says. I'm not going to get into who the woman is or what the beast is. I just want you to think about what God says about his actions and the evil people's actions. He says, I'll start in verse 15. The angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. And the 10 horns that you saw and the beast, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They'll make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. So listen to this. For God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind. in handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Well, what is, besides all the questions about who the woman is and what the beast is, what that says is the reason why people will give honor and worship this satanic being is because God put it in their hearts to do that. Now, they don't know that. They're just doing it because they want to. But the only reason why they want to is because in a level beyond their conscious understanding, God has put it into their hearts to make them do that, like the thing with Pharaoh. So those two passages and a bunch more, Andrew will talk about some tonight, those tell us God is in charge, and we're never going to figure out how it works, but that is the way it works. And it's hard for us to get. I'll send out some resources later today or tomorrow with some more on this if you wanted to read more. But the best way to do it, to get this, is to see it from Scripture and then be looking for it as we read our Bibles.